Hello, this is Case Study 5.1. My name is Gabrielle Perez. Um, this is for crisis response and trauma care. So question 1, are there any legal or ethical issues involved? For example, are there confidentiality issues of concern when shifting the intake to a couple's family context when you believed it was going to be an individual? And then do you need to assess for suicidal, homicidal tendencies? So when I was reading the textbook, a quote that stuck out to me was that no matter what the population context, we as counselors attempt to provide clients with a sense of hope, whether that is a couples intake counseling session or an individual session. Now the intake would be a little bit different because the counselor does need to be sensitive to the interactions between the couples because it does influence how the individuals react or behave. We might not see that if the individual came in by themselves. Miller also states that an assessment needs to be done to see if there are any positive feelings for each other during a couples session. The intake for couples versus individual will be very different because the couple is your client, not the individual, each individual. I would if the male says or behaves a certain way that would lead me to believe that maybe he might have some suicidal, homicidal tendencies. I would, depending on the level, what he is like when he comes in. How would you address any of these ethical legal issues? With this client especially, I would go over informed consent to make sure that he understood, they understood explicitly where the ethical legal boundaries are. I would take this approach and be very firm with it so that hopefully it might discourage any issues with either confidentiality, ethical breaches, legal breaches. If I knew something to be ethically wrong, then I would initially approach the client about it, let them know that any more of these breaches would not be tolerated. Question 3, how would any of the factors discussed in Chapter 8 possibly impact your approach in this crisis, particularly focus on those factors that are differences between you and your client and those that are strong personal and professional values for you? So my main counseling goal, my main goal for any counseling session, especially in a crisis situation, is to provide a safe, confidential space to process the crisis. That's number one. I would also strive to be supportive, and in the assessment, I would look for social, cultural, and environmental factors that could be impacting the crisis. So when a counselor is doing this type of, I guess, counseling someone that's very different from themselves, we need to be self-aware and competent multicultural counseling and understand the need to build bridges, as Miller said, between cultural differences of counselor and client. We have to be very careful that we don't have countertransference, and I think those are issues that we need to personally bring up in our own time and be very aware of that. Question 4, how would any of the factors discussed in Chapter 8? Okay, so this is just continued. So I believe that developing a culturally sensitive framework is very important. Counselors should avoid making assumptions about clients. And another comment that really stuck out to me was be an expert in the field of counseling, but not in the client's lives. They understand their lives, or they know their lives much better than we can. So, and counselors must be aware of their own countertransference and address those issues. There are 4 characteristics that are needed by counselors to do multicultural work. And those 4 things are: know oneself, especially our own cultural biases, know the status and cultures of groups, have skills to intervene culturally at an appropriate place, and be flexible in terms of having and using alternative approaches. Have experience working with culturally different people. That is super important, and I think it's a process that we need to continue to learn, especially as society changes, cultures change. We do need to stay abreast of what is going on. This is my last slide. This is where I got my resources from. Thank you so much.